Hey, what's up, guys? It's Nick from ArchCityPLO.com and Arch City Poker. And in today's video, like I said a couple videos ago, I'm going to give you some bonus PLO content. This is going to be a hand history review. And this is the kind of content, at least part of the kind of content that you can get on the new site, focusing on live, low to mid stakes PLO training. So let's get right into it. This was a very recent 2-2 game that I played in locally where I live, and get a limper under the gun for $2. I decided to raise to pot with Jack 10 7-6 double. This is very much at pretty much the very bottom of my range in this spot. Some of the worst combos I'm going to have are these double suited connectors that aren't quite rundowns. So Jack 10 9 7, Jack 10 8 6, or 8 7, I should say. Those would be quite a bit stronger. I feel comfortable enough post flop against these players and against this particular table this day. I did feel comfortable enough, I should say, that I could go ahead and raise this type of combo. So I do go ahead and do that. And a player who I deem to be pretty solid on the button, and you're not going to find a lot of solid PLO players, to be quite frank, in the live low stakes games. He does decide to call. He has me covered. Big blind calls, and the player under the gun calls. So the reason that we, again, want to have nuttiness pre-flop, strong double-suited stuff, big pairs, very, very connected single-suited combos, essentially rundowns, is the reason is that we're going to see a lot of multi-way pots, as you see here. So we got to be careful. My suits are not as live when you're multi-way, but I am pretty connected. I'm going to be able to get away from, weaker flushes if need be, but I feel comfortable in this spot. So flop comes 10-8-8, and as you guys saw in the title and the thumbnail, the theme of this video is that essentially you can bluff in live low stakes PLO. There's not as many spots for it as a no limit, but there's a big misconception that you can never bluff. Now, I do start out with a check, and the reason that I do that is that if this player were not solid, I might start out with a bet here, having the 10 blocker, having the gutter, having the backdoor spades. I think it's a situation that if I do bet my trips plus sometimes, if I am taking a more straightforward approach against the weaker players, then I probably would want to mix in some bluffs with my 10x combos. Those make the most sense. You're blocking the overfull, and then I have some equity to fall back on as far as the gutter, the backdoor flush draw, obviously. But the fact that I have a pretty solid player on the button who understands range versus range thinking. He understands that in my early to middle position raising range, I don't have a ton of like trips plus at this point. I have a lot of overpairs, a lot of like one pair hands or air essentially that is not going to be able to support a C bet. My range is not going to be able to support a bet in this spot often enough. He can get pretty aggressive. So I think he's going to believe that I should be checking a lot in this spot. So not only am I going to check a lot of my very strong combos here, but I'm also going to check some of those combos that I'm going to mix in as part of like check raise bluffs, possibly check call, planning to steal the pot later if I wanted to implement like a float play from out of position. I don't like doing that as much, but I might need to add some combos like this against a player that is pretty solid. So I do check to him, and he actually checks back. And now we see an 8 of hearts. So essentially, my 10's no good anymore. Of course, in PLO, we need to play 2 cards and only 2 cards. So pocket pairs are boats now. I do not have a boat here with Jack 10. But once both these players check to me, I think a lot of times that these straightforward players in the live low to mid stakes PLO games, they will do a fair amount of leading, feeling that they just need protection. They just play a lot more straightforward than they do in no limit. Because they didn't lead the flop, and because now they're not essentially going for possibly a value bet, I don't think players bluff enough in this spot. But because they just don't bet in general, I don't think they really have an 8 often enough. I think my opponent on the button is good enough to check back some 8x hands, but I think he also would bet a fair amount of them, knowing that these players will make some calling mistakes. So I think it's a good situation to actually start bluffing, planning to bluff the river. I don't think this is going to get through right now that often. I think it'll get through decently often. But having the 10 and planning to try to bluff players off of like pocket jacks, pocket nines, most pocket pairs, I think it's going to be tougher to get them off of. Like my opponent can have weak aces. He can have some kings, some queens. It's probably going to be pretty tough to get him off of most of those. But I think it's a situation where if I bet now and then I barrel the river, it's going to look super strong. And whether you guys are playing no limit or PLO, essentially if you are unsure of a spot being a good spot to bluff, if it looks like you can't have bluffs and you just really like always almost have it, then that's a spot you should be bluffing. Like that's the simplest way I can put it. So it's tough for me to be bluffing here. I think it's at least perceived that it's tough for me to be bluffing. I think my opponent on the button knows I can be. He knows what kind of player I am. But I do go ahead and bet for half pot. I don't need to really size up. I don't think I need a whole lot of protection at this point when I'm value betting. So to balance that out, I'm going to go ahead and bluff for the same amount. If I bet larger than this, I think I'm just risking too much with my bluffs. I don't think I'm getting worse hands to call often enough when I do have, say, full houses, like if I do have pocket kings or something like that. So I think it's a good situation to bet small on such a lockdown board. So the good player decides to call on the button. And a 4 on the river is not going to really change a whole lot. So I need to follow through with my plan here. If I'm going to value bet aces, quads, obviously, then I have to bluff against this type of player. This is a little bit of a rare situation where I need to balance my range in a live PLO setting. So I need to follow through. I'm going to polarize and try to rep essentially pocket aces, quads, and then maybe some king-king. I think I could go ahead and pot king-king here. So I do go ahead and pot it. That makes the most sense. I'm trying to get max value. I'm also trying to apply max pressure when bluffing. And it actually ends up working. He ends up folding, but he showed me pocket kings, which I was a little bit surprised he folded that. I think he's way too high up in his range to fold that at any kind of reasonable frequency. I think that has to call against a player like me, like very often, maybe almost always, I would say. So I just want to give you guys, obviously, some bonus PLO content to show you that there is a certain amount of skill that you need in this game, and there are spots that you can play poker, so to speak, that you can bluff. They won't, like I said, happen as often as they do in No Limit, but they do occur. So, like I said, this could be the kind of content that you can find on my new site. Click on the subscribe button, click on the like, click the link, most importantly to me. Visit the site. I think you guys will be very happy with what you find there. So if you guys have any questions or comments, go ahead and let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.